All right, everybody, welcome to the Principia Fitness Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jason Winland, one of our longtime members, and also he's recently gone through a new Tide class that we're going to be discussing today. So anyway, let's let Jason tell you a little bit about his history with CrossFit, what brought him here, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I started doing CrossFit when I was about 35. You know, just like a lot of people, I was going to the gym like Gold's or Axiom, and you just get bored after a while. You know, it's just the same thing. You're having to come up with your own programming, and you're fighting for equipment and space, and I just started getting tired of it. So
yeah, or you just read about what Arnold did, so that seems right. You know, if Arnold did it, why shouldn't you?
Yeah, I think I was reading Men's Health magazine. I think I had a subscription at the time, and they used to have these fold outs, and they would have workouts, and they were, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but they were basically CrossFit workouts, you know, and I would set up all this gear at the gym at Gold's, and I would do these workouts, and people were just like, kind of like, what's this guy doing? You know, he's like moving from station to station and
Sweating a lot.
Sweating a lot, and one of the trainers came up to me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of CrossFit?" And so I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, we're doing group CrossFit classes up here. Come check it out, sign up." So I did, and instantly knew that it was the right thing for me.
Where was that?
It was actually at Axiom.
Axiom, was it the one on Park Center?
Park Center.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a little area upstairs where they had the
I was
rigs.
there. Yeah.
They had rigs, they had barbells, they had kettlebells, and they had all the equipment.
You might have been there the same time I was downstairs just doing meathead workouts. So, yeah.
So it was great. I fell in love with it instantly, and from that day forward, I've never looked back. You know, then some circumstances changed. I ended up joining an actual box and stayed with them until basically they went out of business. And, you know, during this time I had sustained an injury to my leg playing softball. So I broke my ankle and was immobile for basically an entire summer, you know, on crutches and a boot, physical therapy. And I jumped right back into CrossFit day one as soon as I was able to put weight on my foot again. And, you know, thankfully I had a good base level of fitness because I was able to bounce back relatively quickly from the injury.
Sure.
But one of the things I didn't realize is that due to all that atrophy, and even though my leg was the same size as the other leg and everything felt normal, there was, you know, as we discovered later, some imbalances that were created.
Right.
And then those started leading to issues with my lower back. And then I've also had a lot of issues with my thoracic spine, any overhead movements. I pop ribs out, you know, hours and hours, you know, laying with ice packs on ibuprofen, going to the chiropractor, you know. Grumpy, just miserable, right? And then as soon as you start to feel better, you come back in, and then, you know, you push it a little bit too hard, and then boom, you're right back into that.
Yeah, you were in that, what I call, and I've experienced it as well, is that cycle of pain where it's like the second you feel better, you decide that you are better, and then you actually aren't better. Yeah. So what we know from experience and just from education and things is we understand that right when you're feeling better is probably the most crucial time to actually have a coach to tell you you're not better yet. We are just starting to get there, right? There's going to be another setback. There's going to be a couple setbacks, but let's not just go nuts. Let's do this in a smart way where we can measure things. We can understand our intensity a little bit. And instead of just going from, we've been doing, you know, if you were taking a break from it, we've been doing 0% rate of perceived exertion all the way up to just 90 all of a sudden. That's usually not a recipe that is going to be successful. Right. So we understand that the recipe that is going to be successful is going to be, let's take them from 0 to 60 to 70 to 75, right?
Yeah.
We progressionally get you back into it until 90 starts feeling good, not just like a risk, but good.
Yeah.
At any rate, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Right before you joined, one of the big things when you did join here was something with the hips, right?
Yeah.
The hips and lower back.
Yeah. So I basically, you know, after doing CrossFit for 7 years, I just basically was in that loop of constant injury and pain that I had to quit. And then I did nothing. You know, I sat around. I was discouraged. I was depressed. I was searching, and you know, that's the time when I started calling around gyms and basically interviewing.
Yeah.
And you were the first person that I actually spoke to on the phone that said, rather than, hey, just come drop in class, you know, here's our schedule, you actually wanted to sit down and have a conversation with me. And after I met you, and you know, you were asking me about all my history, what my why, you know, why do I want to be here, what are my goals, and that's when I realized, like, okay, this guy's serious. These people care about their members and their community, and I think I've been here. This May was 3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, you joined here pretty close to when we first started, which is why I'm thrilled that even back then, when I was still trying to figure this out more, even back then you got that feeling that I cared and stuff, and I was doing that right, which is good, because I've definitely gotten a lot better at that. So I think we're lucky in that regard, and we were lucky to have you come in and then stay for so long. It's been great. But then somewhere along the line, the cycle of re-injury was still happening here. It wasn't like you came here and it was just gone.
Right.
We noticed it from a staff perspective, right? Like my team and I were like, let's talk about Jason. Let's figure this out. And we were educating ourselves in some ways that I think separate us from most other gyms in that we are training specifically to get people out of pain or to keep people out of pain. And how do we assess that and then figure that out from there? So we started undergoing a massive education thing for our staff. And once we took you through it, it became pretty apparent that we knew what to do. Will you kind of talk about what we did to discover the things that we discovered and all that process?
Oh, you mean like how we went through the mobility, flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it started, right?
Right.
Mobility, flexibility, and then what did we find there? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, definitely. We discovered that, I mean, what you suspected was absolutely true, that my left leg was basically about twice as strong.
Right, okay, so you're talking about the strength and balance stuff.
Right.
So not flexibility stuff, but the strength and balance stuff was where Jason was like, okay, there's the picture. I mean, the flexibility stuff, if I remember right, you just were like tight in the ankles, but not so limited in range of motion, just tight right near that in range, which anytime that's the case and we're trying to squat and that ankle has to go into a certain amount of dorsiflexion, it can cause you to hesitate. And that is definitely you hesitate when you squat, and that's probably because there's some things going on in that ankle, but then also upstream in the hip as well, especially when you have a past injury, it becomes part of your subconscious to avoid anything near that problem area. So we were seeing that as well. But then we took you through that imbalance test, and that was like, especially just the step-up test. Do you remember what your results were the first time?
I think on my right leg, I was able to get 12, and on my left leg, I was able to get 24.
Yeah,
so
we like stopped people at 24.
2X.
We're just like, okay, this is just ridiculous at this point.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you uncovered was that because of the kind of things in the back of my head, worrying about past injuries and stuff, that I was over tightening.
Yeah, we did notice that as well.
I mean, I was tightening my core to the point where I'm going to have an aneurysm. So what protect it.
So what Jason's alluding to right now is super important, I think, lesson for a lot of especially CrossFitters, but you could talk about anybody who deadlifts probably, is we're always taught to like brace through your guts. So everybody thinks the abdomen only. So they take this deep breath in and they squeeze their abs as hard as they can. But what they don't understand is that when we do that, we want to also brace the backside as well. So that backside, the rib should be tall over the pelvis. And what happens when we over brace is we actually push that rib down. So it almost goes behind the pelvis as you go into more of a hollow position. And it's super tight and it's a really strong position and it's beneficial for some things. But what we find with deadlifting is it actually creates back pain most of the time. And yeah, we definitely notice that, and it's just like any athlete is going to brace just enough to get the job that they need done right. Like, so You could probably explain that a little bit when you're doing a 95-pound thruster versus, a 115-pound thruster or a 200-pound front squat. Those are very different amounts of tension that you need for each one, correct?
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the concept anyway. So yeah, we discovered the overbracing as well, and that's more of we just noticed him doing that a lot, and it was over time we kind of figured out that there could be a correlation with the pain that he's experienced as well. Yeah. But the step-up thing is a huge thing. Yeah. When your leg is significantly stronger than your other leg, you are, every time you're squatting, every time you're deadlifting, every time you're doing a bilateral movement, which is where you use both sides at the same time, you are overworking your dominant leg. Like whatever leg is stronger will subconsciously stay stronger, and it will continue to get stronger. So you're going to expand your deficit if you just keep doing those movements without ever training separate legs. And we find that a lot in CrossFit just because we squat so much, that there is imbalances that don't get addressed sometimes. And when those imbalances don't get addressed, the weak leg atrophies a little bit. And so then you have like this whole pelvic shearing thing going on where this side's really strong and this side's really weak. And usually that exacerbates itself through back pain, sometimes knee pain, and whatever other pain you want to call it. It could even be a shoulder thing. Let's talk about, real quick, the rib thing too.
Yeah. I've been working in an office environment for 20 years, and I'm sitting most of the time under a lot of stress, and so and my posture's terrible. So I think, and I carry a lot of my stress through my shoulders, and so whenever I would start, I'd come in, I'd be really tight, and even we'd go through warm-ups and range of motion and get everything going. Anything sort of explosive overhead, like push jerks or clean and jerks, I would get that weight overhead and I would immediately feel a searing pain, and I'd have to drop the weight, and then I would just be out, like end of class, done.
At least a day.
At least a day, if not, couldn't go longer. And then, I was going to the chiropractor and having to get it popped back in. And
yeah, how much money would you say you've probably spent on a chiropractor just to pop in a rib after a CrossFit class?
It's probably about $45
per visit.
Per visit, and sometimes I would have to go 2 times a week, for a month.
Yeah.
And so I was spending about $200 a month in chiropractic bills.
Cool. Not cool. Basically, what we're getting at is we can assess these things and figure out a better way to train, and a better way to train for you specifically, and avoid getting. So how long has it been since you've slipped a rib now? And it was happening literally probably every week, if not every month, would be like the longest stint that you would go is maybe a month. And it was frustrating for me to watch, so I can only imagine it was really frustrating to experience. How long has it been since you've popped out a rib at this point?
It's been about 6 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, going from monthly and we keep knocking on wood. Anyway, so what we're going into today is we're going to talk about Tide class. So this is a class that we offer. It's part of our Win It Back process. So in the Win It Back process, you start with one-on-one training, then you go into Tide, and then you go into our group classes. All right? Tide is like this hybrid group class where half of it is individual programming for the needs of the individual. So even if it's someone who wants to lose weight, get better at Olympic lifting, whatever, get out of pain is usually what we're dealing with, but it could be any of those types of goals, then those part of that class is just catered just to make you better at the thing that you want to be better at. And then the other part of the class is just that group atmosphere. We do a workout, we get sweaty, we do a Metcon usually. And yeah, so could you explain a little bit about your experience with the Tide class?
Yeah, you laid it out pretty well. We would come in, we would have our individual work programmed for us on the app, so you knew ahead of time, just like if you were signing up for a class, kind of get yourself mentally prepared. Had all the preparation notes in there, so we'd come in, we'd warm up, we'd do our individual programming, and then after everything was finished, then we'd get together and do a group Metcon just like we would in any of the other classes.
What would you say the difference between like a regular class and that really was for you?
I mean, just working on my individual goals. You know, everybody has different needs, and I felt it was very specifically tailored towards the imbalances and the issues that I've been dealing with.
Right.
So
The only other person who maybe had some similar things would have been a person also experiencing a similar thing, which was back pain.
right,
So like you and Ted sometimes would get to do the same exercise together.
right,
Because you might sync up on that day or whatever. But just so we're clarifying a little bit, they don't just come in and just get started and there's no coaching. The coach is there. One coach is dedicated solely to that group of individuals. And it's the same coach that programmed the information for those individuals. So they know exactly what they're looking for to get out of it. So they can make sure it gets done correctly. They can make sure the tempo is done correctly. They can make sure that the person is receiving the stimulus correctly. All of that is very important. Whereas like if you were to just give somebody a program and expect them to do it on their own, there's a good chance that they get a certain percentage of it right and a certain percentage of it wrong. Whereas we're there to make sure it's 100% right.
yeah.
So there's that aspect of it too. Could you maybe explain, for those that do CrossFit in the audience, can you explain kind of why it's important to almost take that step in that direction to later be able to enjoy CrossFit again? Like you stepped out of regular CrossFit classes
Yep.
and now you're back into them. Can you explain why you feel like that was important?
Well, it's a big, complicated question, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. You know, mentally, I started to get to that point again where I was discouraged, and I'm like, I don't love CrossFit anymore because I'm associating it with, you know, injuries and setbacks and frustration, and so to me, it gave me a roadmap, a plan, and it you know, helped me step back and reestablish my goals, because the reason I do it and my goals, they change over time.
Right.
Right. When I first started CrossFit, it was, you know, I was looking for something different, and you know, my goals were more aesthetic. You know, I wanted to look like Rich Froning, or I wanted to look like, you know, the ultimate athlete. But as time has progressed, my goals have changed. You know, now I'm more, you know, I want to avoid injury. I want to have longevity. I want to be able to do things with my family, go hiking, go biking, go paddleboarding, go skiing.
Trampoline parks.
And so it really helped me step back and take a time out and reevaluate what my goals are. And once I knew I was solid on what my goals were, then we had a roadmap to kind of get me there. And, you know, so once I started working the plan, it became apparent right away, like, hey, we're starting to see some incremental improvements here. There was a lot of hands-on, you know, with the specific programming for me. Like you were saying, you don't just set us free and let us, you know, you're there to correct us, to make sure that we're doing it properly so we get 100% of the benefit, rather than doing it 70% and getting 70% of the benefit, we're getting the full benefit. And that just shifts the timeline to help you get to your goals quicker.
That's a super good note. It does dramatically shift that timeline to do it like that. And I would argue that like any goal is that way. When we get into a CrossFit class typically here, there's maybe 10 to 15 people in it, and there's one coach to all those athletes, right? There's a lot of work to get done in that, you know, hour. And if you're not intentionally moving that whole minute or that whole hour, and not continually every single rep thinking about how this is going to help the thing that you're working on, then you're leaving a lot on the table. So having that coach in that individual programming, like making sure that like, hey, like make sure your big toe's down. Like that was probably one that I cued you on quite a few times, right?
Yeah.
That one, and like making sure your pelvis isn't rotating, like little things that like subconsciously we're still working hard. Like it's not like Jason was being lazy. It's just that there's those refinements of the movement pattern that we can work on to get better stimulus out of it. Yep. So we could spend less time to get the thing done. So we could take somebody who has back pain, get them out of back pain in like 3 months versus 6 to 8 months, which is what it would take if We just kind of gave them the program, and maybe they executed it well or not. At any rate, I wanted to talk a little bit about, so you had a recent experience, I think it was this week, where we did the workout Jackie, and you were kind of telling me mindset going in versus coming out of Jackie and through Jackie, and it was a good moment for you because now Jason's not in the pain. He's on the CrossFit train again, right? The group class train again. Yep. So can you just explain the Jackie experience?
Yeah, so I came into it with, hey, I love Jackie. It's one of my favorite.
I guess we should probably say what Jackie's 1,000-meter row.
Yep.
50 thrusters and 30 pull-ups for time.
For time. But I kind of went into it and I vocalized my strategy with you. I said, hey, I just wanted to bounce this off you. Hey, I think I'm gonna scale this. I'm gonna do the row, but I'm gonna go like 60, 70. I'm gonna do the thrusters, but maybe I'll bring it down to like 40.
Yeah, we had a 9-minute cap on that.
And there was a 9-minute cap, and my previous PR was like 8:57. So I was like, okay, well, I know I probably had to go like 90% to get that last time. I'm not sure if I'm feeling good enough to go 90%. Let's just try to do 70% and see what happens. Well, as I got going, I realized I said I'm feeling good. This is feeling good, but let's keep it. Let's keep it at about 70. Well, then once I got into the thrusters, I did like 25 unbroken, and didn't set down the bar. And I'm like, well, I think I can do this. I looked at the clock, and I'm feeling good, but let's keep going. And then by the time I got done with the thrusters, I felt even better. And it's like, well, let's go to 80. Let's go to 85. Let's get this thing done. And I ended up actually getting like a 17-second PR on it.
Which is huge. I mean, this is because when we do those tide training thing, there's some conditioning to it and stuff, but a lot of it is like stepping back from the hard, heavy, everyday stuff that's hurting you. So sometimes it feels like you're going slower. Yeah. But sometimes you're actually just going faster and you don't realize it because the perceived effort is lower, but it's appropriate. Whereas I feel like most people, the attitude is if I go harder, it's better. Right. And we know, and that's proof, I think, that harder is not better. Harder is just harder. We can make it smart, and it's still going to have its difficulties. Like mentally, I think it's tough. And then you come out on top like that, which is huge. Yeah. And I could speak similarly because I went through the same process on myself as I went through my own individualized programming based off of the results of analysis and assessment. And I came back into the sport, and now it seems like I can do some workouts just as good and some workouts better. Yeah. And far less frequent aches, pains, whatever, right? And I operate at a pretty intense level, and I work out significant amounts. So it's a huge thing to be able to say that. At any rate, let's get into, I guess, you PR Jackie. That's cool.
I felt great afterwards. I felt great afterwards immediately. I felt great the day after. I was ready to go again. Yeah. And it was funny because when I told you about it, you knew that I was going to do this basically. That you weren't going to actually scale? Yeah. You had a feeling. Yeah. That
I say that shit to myself all the time too.
Yeah. So I'm back in. I'm all in on the CrossFit train again, and I'm excited about it and feeling good. So
cool. And so what do you feel like the future is with this for you right now? With what your next step is for this?
I just want to sustain. Sustainability. I just want to be able to operate at a level that I feel comfortable with, and I feel like it's challenging me, pushing me. I don't really have any set goals right now other than just maintaining the status quo, staying healthy, and just looking forward to coming to the gym every day. And
instead of like getting anxiety about it.
Right.
Yeah. So can you just explain maybe on a rating what was going on pain-wise before, what's going on now?
My low back was probably at a sustaining, out of a scale of 1 to 10, probably a sustaining 4.
Right. Nothing crazy, but
nothing
like
crazy
all the time.
Once in a while there'd be a flare up that would take me up to a 7 or an 8 for a day or two, but it was a constant 4. I would say that I'm at about a 1.
Cool.
And you know, that's a significant improvement.
Yeah, mentally, especially with the back one, back issues are so mentally exhausting. When you are day in and day out like that, you become worse at parenting because your patience has gone down. You're more likely to react to a situation rather than to respond, right? Rather than to collect your thoughts and, you know, articulate appropriately. And you have a pretty high pressure job too, so it's not like you have it easy outside of these walls either. So when this thing kind of sets your whole day up for failure like that, it's no longer serving you.
Right.
So there's a huge difference between a 4 and a 1 when it comes to that stuff. And 1 is like, after you've experienced 4 for so long, 1 is super optimistic.
Yeah.
And some of that 1 might just be up here too, right? It might just be between the ears because subconsciously it's happened. Right? So it's just, it kind of is a part of you, and there's still some time to heal on that regard.
Yeah.
So I would say that the reason we do the Tide class is so that we can create new opportunities for people. So new opportunities as in like you can do the adventure without stressing about potential aches and pains. So Jason can go whitewater rafting with his family and not worry too much about potentially throwing his back out during the trip and then, you know, being a burden to everybody on the trip.
Yep.
Things like that. That's a very specific instance. But also, you mentioned before we started talking, you have one activity that you think that this is specifically just really helped with. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. My free time, one of the things I love to do is play golf. It's very, very relaxing to me. And when you're at a constant level of pain, you step up to that tee box and you're thinking in the back of your mind, just as if you were going to do a snatch. If I hit this ball hard, am I going to hurt my back and then ruin the whole day, ruin the whole round, and be a drag on anybody else that I'm playing with? So I've gone out and played a few rounds so far this spring, and the immediate thing that stood out to me was confidence. You know, like when I walked up to the tee box on the first hole, I just felt more relaxed. I felt more focused. I wasn't thinking in the back of my head about my back because the pain wasn't there. And I've only played a few rounds so far this year, but I'm shooting better already than I have in the last 5 years. I'm hitting the ball straighter, I'm hitting it farther, and I'm enjoying myself a lot more because
Nice.
I'm not constantly worried about, you know,
what
could happen.
It's a big deal. When you lack that confidence, your whole life decision tree goes off the rails. It doesn't align with what you truly want, right? But when you can play with confidence and we're just talking about a game, but it's life too, right?
Right.
Everything you go into with confidence now, you're so much more likely to get the outcomes that you're going for, right? Which everybody says you can't control what happens to you. You can control a lot of it. And if you do the right thing, your outcomes start creating more opportunities for yourself, and you stop making excuses like, I can't control this, right?
Yep.
You've taken control of what's in your sphere, and now the other things are just magnetized to you, which in a good way, right? So positive light moving forward. And now we got your wife in here doing the thing, and she's very anti-CrossFit. So it's been really cool to kind of get her in the process and her to understand where we come from. Whereas I think there's an expectation of CrossFit is XXX, and then we do it very differently here. And we may just be calling it fitness from now on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Jason. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thanks for trusting me to work with you and your family. I really appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one, guys.